The snow came sideways. Jack Harmon had lived in Chicago for 31 years, and he knew the difference between a winter evening and a winter threat. This was the latter, the kind of cold that had weight to it, that pressed against your chest and made breathing feel like a chore, the kind of snow that didn't fall so much as attack. He stood on the corner of Wacker and Michigan, with Lily bundled against his chest, her small body wrapped inside his coat, her arms around his neck. She was burning up. He could feel the heat of her through 2 layers of flannel, and every few minutes she would cough a wet, rattling sound that tightened something in his rib cage that had no name. "We're okay," he told her, though he wasn't sure who he was reassuring. She didn't respond. She was 6 years old and had stopped arguing with him about 15 minutes ago, which was more frightening than the fever. He checked his phone again. The Uber app showed a driver named Derek, 7 minutes away, and then 9 minutes away, and then the icon simply vanished from the map. The app reloaded. "No drivers available in your area. Please try again." Jack's battery was at 11%. He'd called the pediatric urgent care on Clark Street, and they'd told him to bring her in, that a fever of 104 was nothing to wait out. He'd tried to call his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who sometimes watched Lily on late shifts, but the call dropped twice and on the third attempt went straight to voicemail. He'd tried to hail 2 taxis and both had their lights off. The city had gone quiet in the way cities only go quiet during serious weather, not peaceful quiet, but the held breath quiet of something waiting to happen. Lily coughed again. "I know, Bug," he said. "I know." He pulled his coat tighter around her and scanned the street. He had $63 in his checking account and a credit card that was $300 from its limit. He had a shift at the warehouse, starting at 6 a.m. He had a daughter who needed a doctor and a phone that was dying and snow that showed no intention of stopping. He had been a systems engineer once, at a firm downtown with a corner office and a company parking pass, and a salary that made these kinds of nights impossible. That was before Claire. Before the accident. Before Lily was 18 months old and he was suddenly the only thing standing between her and the world. He didn't think about that anymore. Or he tried not to. A car turned onto Michigan from the north, and Jack stepped forward automatically, arm out, not quite hailing, just hoping. The vehicle slowed. It was a black Cadillac Escalade, the kind with tinted windows and a quiet engine that suggested money rather than announcing it. Jack registered none of this. He saw a car stopping. He saw his daughter's chance. He pulled open the rear door and climbed in, tucking Lily against his chest, shaking snow from his shoulders. The interior was warm absurdly, immediately warm, and smelled of leather and something subtle. Expensive, nothing he could name. "Northwestern Memorial, please," he said. "Or Chicago Children's. Whichever is closer. She has a fever of 104, and He stopped. The woman in the back seat was looking at him. She was not a driver. She was not wearing a hat or a uniform or the expression of someone who had been expecting a stranger to climb into their vehicle. She was sitting with one leg crossed over the other, a slim laptop open on her knees, reading glasses perched on her nose. She was perhaps 35. Her coat was the color of dark charcoal and clearly cost more than his monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back in a way that suggested a professional had arranged it that morning, and it had held through the entire day regardless. She was staring at him with the particular stillness of someone deciding how to respond. In the front seat, a man in a dark suit, mid-40s, broad-shouldered, had half-turned toward him with an expression Jack could only describe as professional alarm. "Sir," the man in front said carefully, "this is a private vehicle." Jack felt the cold settle back into him. He looked at the woman. She looked at him. Then her eyes moved down to where Lily's small face was just visible above the collar of his coat, flushed, slack with exhaustion, fever pink. A silence stretched for exactly 3 seconds. "Northwestern Memorial," the woman said, without taking her eyes off the child. Her voice was even and precise. "Marcus, take us to Northwestern Memorial." "Miss Caldwell?" Now, please." The car moved. Jack Harmon was not, by nature, a man who accepted charity gracefully. He had grown up in a house where you fixed your own roof and you didn't ask the neighbors, and you certainly didn't owe anyone anything. He had carried that quality into adulthood like a piece of furniture you kept moving from apartment to apartment, slightly too large for every room. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought there was an Uber, and the app I didn't realize." "It's fine," the woman said. She had already returned her attention to her laptop, though he noticed she wasn't actually reading it. "It's really not. I can get out at the next light, and your daughter has a fever of 104, and it's 20 degrees outside." She glanced up. "Stay in the car, mister?" "Harmon." "Jack Harmon." She gave a single nod. She did not offer her own name. Lily stirred, made a small, unhappy sound. Jack shifted her so she could rest her head on his shoulder, and without thinking he began doing the thing he always did. A slow, rhythmic pressure on her back, 4 beats, a pause, 4 beats, as if his hands could press the fever out of her. He caught the woman watching this. "She's 6, he said, because silence felt heavier than words. "I know." She looked away again. He studied the side of her face. There was something controlled about her, controlled in the way of people who had decided early that composure was armor, and had spent years reinforcing it. Not cold, exactly. More like precise, like she allowed herself exactly as many expressions as were necessary and kept the rest behind glass. "I appreciate this," he said. "Genuinely. I've been trying to get an Uber for 40 minutes. In this weather, the algorithms pull the drivers off the road." She said it without judgment, simply as information. "Did you try calling ahead to the hospital?" "Yes." "They're expecting her." She nodded. Lily coughed, and the woman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Just a flicker. There and gone. "She's been sick since this afternoon," Jack said. He wasn't sure why he was still talking, except that the alternative was sitting in silence with a strange woman in an expensive car while his daughter radiated heat against his chest. Started as a normal cold, I thought. Went to pick her up from school and her teacher said she'd been sleeping in the reading corner for 2 hours. The woman's eyes returned to him. "She does that," he said. "When she's trying not to bother anyone, she just finds somewhere quiet." He realized he was doing the thing he sometimes did when he was scared talking too much, filling space. He stopped. "What do you do?" the woman asked. She asked it the way someone asks a question they don't actually expect to be interesting. "Warehouse logistics. Loading dock supervisor." He paused. "Before that, I was in software engineering. Infrastructure, architecture." Something shifted in her expression. Not surprise, exactly closer to recalibration. "What changed?" He looked down at Lily. The answer seemed obvious enough that he didn't say it. The woman followed his gaze. She was quiet for a moment. "My assistant will call ahead to the hospital," she said. "Tell them you're 2 minutes out." "You don't have to." "Marcus," she said. "Call the Northwestern ER and tell them we're bringing in a pediatric patient. Fever of 104. ETA, 2 minutes." "Yes, Miss Caldwell." Jack opened his mouth. "Don't," she said simply. Not unkindly. He closed it. The city moved past outside white and orange and blurred through the tinted glass. Lily's breathing had gone slower, more even. The warmth of the car was doing something. Jack kept his hand moving on her back. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats. He was aware, distantly, that he was sitting in the most expensive vehicle he had ever been inside, next to a woman who might be famous for all he knew, in a coat that had a hole in the left elbow he'd been meaning to patch since October. He was aware that he probably had snow still melting in his hair. He didn't care about any of that. What he was aware of, more specifically, was that the woman beside him had never once looked at him the way people sometimes looked at him now. The particular look that catalogued the coat and the tired eyes and the absence of a wedding ring and arrived at a conclusion. Before he'd said a word, she had looked at him when he climbed in, the way you look at something unexpected. And she had looked at Lily the way someone looks at something that matters. The car stopped. "Here," Marcus said. Jack pushed the door open, snow rushing back in for a moment, cold after the warmth. He stepped out, Lily still in his arms, and turned back. The woman was watching him with those precise, evaluating eyes. "Thank you," he said. "Seriously, I thank you." She gave another single nod, small, like punctuation. He carried Lily through the automatic doors and didn't look back, because he had learned a long time ago that looking back didn't get you anywhere. Inside the car, Catherine Caldwell sat very still for a moment. Then she closed her laptop. "Miss Caldwell?" Marcus asked. "We're going to be late for the Meridian dinner. Call them," she said, "and tell them I'll be 45 minutes. Should I say why?" She picked up her phone and began scrolling through something that wasn't actually the thing she was thinking about. "No," she said. "Just tell them I'll be there." The hospital room was narrow and too bright. Lily had been given something for the fever and something for the inflammation in her throat, and had fallen asleep with startling speed. The way children do, one moment awake and unhappy, the next simply gone into sleep like a door closing. Jack sat in the plastic chair beside her bed and let his shoulders drop for the first time in 3 hours. A nurse came in at 10:30 with paperwork, and he went through the familiar motions: insurance information, medical history, signature here, initial there. It was only when the nurse mentioned that the billing had already been processed that he frowned. "Sorry, your account was settled. At the front desk, about 20 minutes ago." The nurse, a young woman with a ponytail and the particular patience of someone who had explained confusing things many times, checked her tablet. "Covered in full. Looks like a VIP account." "I didn't." He stopped. "I don't have a VIP account." The nurse shrugged apologetically. "You're down as Mr. Harmon, right? Jack Harmon?" She showed him the screen. He stared at it. "There must be a mistake," he said. "Administration said it was settled. If you want to talk to billing..." "No." Yes, I'll figure it out." She left, and he sat back down, looking at his daughter's sleeping face. Lily had her mother's nose and her mother's habit of sleeping with one hand curled under her chin, and sometimes this was just a thing Jack knew, neutral as weather, and sometimes it was a stone in his chest. He thought about the woman in the car. He thought about the way she'd said Northwestern Memorial, flat and decisive, and the way her assistant had already been dialing before the sentence was finished. He thought about the way she'd watched Lily, not with pity, which he'd learned to recognize and resent, but with something that looked closer to recognition, like she was seeing something she understood. He didn't know her name. He had his phone in his hand, battery now at 4%. He typed into a search bar, Black Escalade, Chicago Caldwell, and felt immediately ridiculous, and cleared it. He would figure out the billing. He would pay it back somehow. That was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, Lily's breathing was even, and the fever was coming down, and the room was warm, and outside the snow was still falling, but it didn't matter anymore because they were inside it. That was enough. It had to be. Across the city, in a corner office on the 42nd floor of a building that had her name in small letters near the top, Catherine Caldwell stood at the window and looked at the snow. She had been to the Meridian dinner. She had shaken the right hands and said the right things and navigated an hour of conversation with the particular efficiency she'd spent 15 years perfecting. She was home by 11:30. Her apartment was on the 38th floor, with a view that other people described as spectacular and that she mostly treated as wallpaper. She had poured herself 2 fingers of scotch and had not drunk it. She kept thinking about a man's hands on his daughter's back. 4 beats, steady as a metronome. The total unconsciousness of it, he hadn't even known he was doing it. It was just what his hands did when she was scared. Catherine had built Caldwell Strategic Partners from 14 employees and a rented office in Lincoln Park to one of the top 3 mid-market investment advisory firms in the Midwest. She had been named to Forbes' list of most powerful women in business 3 years running. She had negotiated terms that made grown men in $4,000 suits sit back and blink. She was not a person who was easily affected by things. She picked up the scotch, put it back down. She thought about what he'd said, almost offhandedly. Before that, I was in software engineering, infrastructure, architecture, and then the way he'd looked at Lily and hadn't finished the sentence, because the sentence was obvious. Find him, she said aloud. To the empty room. The way people practice sentences they're not sure they mean yet. She meant it. In the morning, she would call the hospital. She would find out his name. She already knew his name, and from his name, she would find out what she needed to find out. She had a director of research who could have a profile assembled in 4 hours. She thought about the hole in his coat. She thought about the way he'd started to argue, twice, about getting out of the car. She went to bed. She did not sleep for a long time. Jack's life had a shape he'd made peace with, mostly. He woke at 5:15. He made Lily's lunch half a peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, a small bag of crackers, a note that said "bug" with a drawing of a beetle wearing sunglasses, because that had started as a joke 18 months ago and was now load-bearing. He dropped her at school at 7:30. He was at the warehouse on the far west side by 8. The warehouse was a distribution center for a mid-sized building supply company called Renner and Cole. Jack's job was to manage the loading dock team 6 men, 2 shifts, a rotating schedule of deliveries that required constant coordination, and the management of men who were variously excellent at their jobs and deeply resistant to being told anything. He was good at it. He was good at it in a quiet way. The way some people are good at things that don't have trophies. His supervisor was a man named Dale Whitmore, who had the organizational instincts of a pile-up and the interpersonal skills of an invoice. Dale had been with Renner and Cole for 11 years and operated under the theory that volume was a substitute for clarity. Harmon. Dale appeared at his elbow at 9:15 on the Thursday morning after the storm. Pellegrini's shipment is coming in short again. I need those numbers by noon. I sent them to you yesterday afternoon, Jack said, without looking up from the manifest. Send them again. Jack sent them again. He ate lunch in the break room with 2 of his guys, a 22-year-old named Brandon who was studying to be an EMT, and a 58-year-old named Frank who had worked the dock for 20 years and knew the location of every pallet in the building, from memory. They talked about the Bulls. They talked about the weather. They did not talk about money or ambition or the gap between where they were and where they'd imagined themselves, because everyone on the dock understood that gap existed, and talking about it didn't make it smaller. Lily was better by Thursday. By Friday, she was entirely herself again, relentlessly curious, argumentative about bedtime, currently working through a phase of asking questions Jack couldn't answer. Why is the sky darker at the edges? Why do birds have hollow bones? How do mirrors know which direction to flip? That last one, Jack said, is a genuinely interesting question. I know, Lily said. He took her to the library on Saturday morning the way he did every Saturday he wasn't working a double. She went directly to the science section, which she had been systematically working through since September. He sat at a table nearby with a cup of coffee from the cart near the entrance and watched her pull books from shelves with the focused satisfaction of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. He did not think about the woman from the car. He tried, at least. He was mostly successful. On Thursday morning, Catherine was in a meeting about a potential acquisition in the logistics sector when her director of research, a meticulous woman named Patricia Voss, slid a folder across the table to her. Catherine put her hand on it without opening it. She continued the meeting. She opened it afterward, alone in her office, standing at her desk. Jackson Aaron Harmon, 34. Former senior infrastructure engineer at Hexagon Systems, she recognized the firm. Solid, mid-tier firm, good clients. Left 4 years ago following the death of his wife, Claire Ann Harmon, née Whitfield, in a car accident. Single father of 1 daughter, Lily Mae Harmon, age 6. currently employed as loading dock supervisor at Renner and Cole Distribution, previously attempted to return to the engineering sector. 2 interviews, both failed to advance to offer stage. There was more. She skimmed it. She put the folder in her top drawer and went to her next meeting. She rescheduled the meeting after that one to free up time and spent 40 minutes on a thing she told herself was routine due diligence. The building supply company he worked for was nowhere near the level of her firm's portfolio interests. She made a call anyway. Asked a few indirect questions of a contact in industrial distribution. She told herself she was not doing what she was doing. Then she told Patricia to find her the address of the warehouse. She showed up on a Wednesday. Catherine Caldwell had a wardrobe that her stylist managed with something approaching military precision. The right suit for the right room. The right signal for the right audience. She also owned, in the back of the closet in her guest bedroom, a collection of things from before she was this version of herself. A gray wool coat from graduate school, a pair of dark jeans without any architectural detail, a plain sweater in a color that was approximately navy. She wore those on Wednesday. She left her hair down. She left her car with Marcus on the street and walked. She told herself she was in the neighborhood. She was not in the neighborhood. The neighborhood was a 40-minute drive from her office. The Renner and Cole facility was a large, functional building surrounded by a parking lot that was trying its best. She walked around to the loading dock entrance and stood there for a moment, watching the operations. There were 4 men working. It took her approximately 30 seconds to locate him. He was at the far end of the dock, holding a manifest and talking to a driver who appeared to be arguing with him. Jack's expression was the same as it had been in the car. Patient, attentive, slightly tired in the way of someone who was used to being tired. He said something. The driver said something louder. Jack said something else, measured. And the driver looked at his manifest again and visibly reconsidered. He was good at this. She could see it without knowing the specifics, the particular competence of someone who understood a situation and knew how to move through it without noise. She almost left. She hadn't decided what she was doing here, not really. She hadn't decided what she would say. Then he turned and saw her. He looked at her the way you look at someone who is out of context, the slight narrowing of the eyes that means the brain is searching its files and coming up short. She was nobody he recognized. She was a woman in a gray coat standing near his loading dock. "Help you?" he called over. She walked toward him. "I'm sorry to bother you at work. I'm looking for someone who handles logistics consulting. My firm has a distribution network that's been giving us problems. Someone referred me to this location. It was thin." She was aware it was thin. He looked at her steadily. "We're not a consulting operation. We're a distribution center." "I know. I may have gotten the directions wrong." She looked around with the expression of someone who had gotten the directions wrong. "Is there someone here who might be able to point me in the right direction? At least, I'm trying to understand why our turnaround time on the Western Corridor keeps degrading." He studied her for a moment. Then something in his expression shifted, not quite interest, but the professional alertness of someone who had heard a problem they knew how to think about. "What kind of degradation?" he said. 15% increase in transit time over the last quarter. Consistent across carriers, which suggests the issue isn't the carrier. Could be routing. Could be dock scheduling at the receiving end. He said it automatically. The way you recite something, you know. "What does your loading sequence look like?" She let him talk. He talked with his hands a little, the manifest still in one of them. He asked 3 questions she hadn't anticipated, which was not a thing that happened to her often. She answered honestly because the alternative was losing the thread of the conversation, and she was more interested in the conversation than she'd expected to be. After 10 minutes, he stopped himself. "I'm spending your time," he said. "I came to you," she said, still. He looked at her differently now, not suspiciously, but carefully. Like he was working something out. "I don't know your name." "Catherine," she said. "Not Caldwell, just Catherine." "Jack." He extended a hand. His grip was brief and certain. She felt nothing. That was a lie. She felt something she didn't have a comfortable name for, which was more alarming than nothing would have been. "Thank you for the advice," she said. "I gave you a theory, not advice. Even so." She put her hands in her pockets. "I appreciate it." She walked away. She was aware of the precise moment when he stopped watching, and she was aware that she knew this, and she was aware of what that meant. She did not look back. The thing about Dale Whitmore was that he was not a dishonest man, exactly. He was a man who had organized the universe into things that were his problem and things that were not his problem. And somewhere along the way, he had decided that accuracy fell into the second category. The Pellegrini account had been running short on shipments for 6 weeks. Jack had documented it. He had flagged it, twice in writing and once in person. He had even identified the source, a discrepancy in the inventory management system that was generating pick tickets for quantities that didn't exist, and had written it up clearly enough that Dale would have had to actively try not to understand it. On a Friday in early February, Pellegrini pulled their account. On Friday afternoon, Dale called Jack into the small office near the break room and told him, with the expression of a man delivering news that surprised him, that Jack was being let go. "The Pellegrini situation," Dale said. "Management needs to demonstrate accountability." Jack looked at him for a long moment. "I documented the inventory system error," he said. 6 weeks ago, I sent it to you in writing. That may be. But, twice. Jack, I want to be clear," Jack said, with the particular steadiness of a man who was very angry and had decided anger was not useful, "that you understand this is what happened. I want to be clear that you know I flagged this." Dale had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Your severance will be." "I understand." Jack stood. He got his things. He drove to school to get Lily. He was 20 minutes early, so he sat in the parking lot and did the thing he sometimes allowed himself. When she wasn't watching, he put his head back against the headrest and closed his eyes and let the weight of it be real for 60 seconds. 60 seconds. Then he straightened up. When Lily got in the car, she looked at him the way she sometimes did, that particular attention she'd developed at an age that was too young for it. The reading of small signals. "Dad," she said, "are you okay?" "I'm good, Bug. How was school?" She kept looking at him. "You have your thinking face. My thinking face is my regular face." "No, it's not." She buckled her seatbelt. "Did something happen?" He looked at her in the rearview mirror. 6 years old, serious as a judge, her dark hair in 2 uneven braids, because he was still learning. "I'm going to be looking for new work," he said. "It's fine. It happens." She was quiet for a moment. "Are we going to be okay?" "Yes," he said, with complete certainty. "We're going to be okay." He did not mention that he had $412 in his checking account and a rent payment in 11 days. She was there. He registered this afterward, the fact that she had been there, standing near the far side of the parking lot with the neutrality of someone who had pulled over to check her phone. He noticed her without knowing he'd noticed her. The way you notice things at the edge of your vision when you're focused on something else. Catherine had been there by accident. Or she had been in the area by accident and had found herself in the parking lot by a sequence of small decisions she hadn't examined too closely. She had watched him come out of the building with a cardboard box, not much in it, and walk to his car with the precise, contained movement of a man who had decided how he was going to carry something. She had watched him sit in the car for exactly 60 seconds with his eyes closed. She had watched a small girl with 2 uneven braids climb into the back seat. She had driven back to her office and sat at her desk for 30 minutes without opening a single document. Then she had called Patricia Voss and told her to pull together everything she had on Renner and Cole distribution. And then she had called her head of talent and asked a very specific question about a very specific kind of opening. The call came on a Monday. Jack was in the middle of a job application, a logistics coordinator role at a freight company in Schaumburg, which was a 40-minute commute each way but paid adequately and had benefits. He had his cover letter open and was reading it with the skepticism he applied to all his cover letters which was the skepticism of a man who knew what these documents were supposed to do and doubted his ability to make them do it. His phone showed an unknown Chicago number. He almost didn't answer. He answered, "Mr. Harmon." The voice was professional, warm in a practiced way. "My name is Derek Simmons. I'm the head of talent acquisition at Caldwell Strategic Partners. I'm calling because one of our senior partners has identified a potential role we thought might interest you." Jack looked at his cover letter. "I'm sorry," he said. "How did you get my number?" "You were referred through a mutual professional contact. I'd love to explain more. Do you have 15 minutes for a call?" He had 15 minutes. He had, at present, a great many minutes. The role was real. That was the first thing he verified, quietly, during the call, pulling up Caldwell Strategic Partners on his laptop while Derek talked. The firm was legitimate, more than legitimate. It was substantial, with a portfolio that included infrastructure and supply chain optimization clients, which meant it was the kind of work he actually understood. The role was Director of Operational Analysis, newly created. The salary Derek mentioned was more than Jack had made at Hexagon. "Who referred me?" he asked. A slight pause. "I'm not able to say specifically at this stage, but you came with a strong recommendation." He thought about the woman at the loading dock, Catherine, who had asked questions about logistics and then listened to the answers with the complete attention of someone who already knew the answers. He thought about the car. He thought about the name her assistant had used, Miss Caldwell. Something clicked into place. "I'd like to think about it," he said. "Of course. I'll send over the full job description and I'd like to think about it," he said again, gently. "I'll be in touch." He hung up. He sat with it for an hour. He made dinner, pasta, the simple kind that Lily liked with just butter and cheese, and he watched her eat and tell him about a documentary she'd seen at school, about deep-sea fish that could generate their own light, and he listened and laughed at the right moments, and thought about the offer and what it meant and what it cost. He called the next morning. "I'll come in for the interview," he said, "but I'd like to meet the senior partner who identified this role." Another pause. "Longer this time. I'll see what I can arrange," Derek said. She was in the conference room when he arrived. He saw her through the glass wall from the hallway and stopped walking. She was at the head of a long table, talking to two other people, and she looked the way she had looked in the car, precise, composed, in total command of whatever space she occupied. The gray coat was replaced by a dark blazer. Her hair was up. She was the woman from the car. She was also, as the logo on the lobby wall had just confirmed, the Catherine Caldwell of Caldwell Strategic Partners. He took a breath. He walked in. She looked up when he entered, and there was exactly 1 second, he counted it, where something that might have been uncertainty crossed her face. Then she stood. "Mr. Harmon," she said, "thank you for coming in." He sat down across from her. He looked at her steadily. "So?" he said. "Should I pretend I don't know you? Or should we skip that part?" A pause, a very small breath. "Let's skip it," she said. The interview lasted 2 hours, and it was not the interview either of them had expected. He was qualified. That was established quickly and without sentiment. She asked him technical questions about supply chain optimization and infrastructure analysis, and he answered them with the precision of someone who had spent years living inside these problems, even when the problems he was publicly employed to solve were smaller. She listened. She asked follow-up questions. She pushed back twice, hard, on answers she found incomplete, and he pushed back on the pushback, and she let him, which was not something she did often. Around the 90-minute mark, the other two people who'd started the meeting had found reasons to step out, and it was just the two of them. "You came to the warehouse," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, you were there the day I was let go." A pause. "Yes." He looked at her. "And the hospital bill." She held his gaze. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Outside the glass wall, The firm's open floor hummed with the business of people doing important things. He felt the ordinary friction of a man who had spent a year being careful about what he accepted from people and why. "I don't need to be rescued," he said. Quiet, not aggressive. "I know." She said it simply. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" She put down her pen. She didn't do this often, set down the physical object that served as a prop between her and vulnerability. He noticed. "You got into my car," she said, "and you talked to your daughter the way people talk to people they would do anything for. You didn't perform it. You weren't aware you were doing it. I have spent 15 years in rooms full of people who are always aware of exactly what they're doing and why." She paused. It was unusual. He was very still. "I looked into you," she said, "because that's what I do when something doesn't fit the category I put it in. And you're good at this work. Not adequate, genuinely good. You should be doing work at this level." A beat. "The hospital bill was something I did before I thought it through. That one I can't explain better than I've explained it." He was quiet for a long moment. "If I take this role," he said slowly, "I need to be clear about something. I will do the work because I can do the work, and I will not be here because of." He paused, choosing words. "I need to be here on the same terms as everyone else. That's the only terms I'm offering. And the other thing," she met his eyes. Waited. "Whatever this is," he said, "if it's anything, it can't live inside the professional arrangement. I'm not built for that." A very long pause. "Neither am I," she said. It wasn't a declaration. It was barely an acknowledgement. But in the particular economy of what Catherine Caldwell allowed herself to say, it was substantial. "I'll take the job," he said. He stood. She stood. "Welcome to Caldwell Strategic Partners, Mr. Harmon." "Jack." She allowed herself one small thing, then not quite a smile, but the structural possibility of one. "Jack," she said. The first month was like learning a language. The firm operated with the particular efficiency of a place that had been built by someone who thought efficiency was a moral position. Every meeting had an agenda. Every agenda had a time limit. Decisions were documented. Follow-ups were scheduled. Ambiguity was treated as a solvable problem. Jack had come from a place where the weekly team meeting was Dale, reading a printout aloud in real time. The adjustment was significant. He was good at it. He was good at it faster than he'd expected, which told him something about how long he'd been operating below his own capacity. His team, a group of 3 analysts and 1 associate, had received him with the particular wariness of people who understood that he'd arrived through an unusual channel. He dealt with this the way he dealt with the dock crew. Directly, without apology. By being competent at the work and letting that be the argument. By the end of the second week, the wariness was mostly gone. By the end of the first month, one of the analysts, a sharp 26-year-old named Marcus Webb, no relation to the driver, had started staying 30 minutes late on Tuesdays to walk through methodology with him. He and Catherine existed in the firm the way 2 objects in a space exist when they're aware of each other. Occupying adjacent rooms, attending the same meetings, speaking with the precision of 2 people who had agreed, silently, to take something slowly. She was not warm in the office. She was not warm the way some people warm up as you know them better. She was warm in specific moments. The way a room is warm near the fireplace, you had to be in the right place, paying attention. He paid attention. He noticed that she remembered things people told her, small things. The kind that people say without expecting to be heard. She would reference, 2 weeks later, something an analyst had mentioned about a brother's health scare. A trip someone was planning. She didn't make a production of it. She just remembered. He noticed that she ate lunch at her desk, and that this was not efficiency but habit, and that the habit came from somewhere. He noticed that she sometimes stood at her office window, the large one that looked north, not the one that faced the conference room, and looked at nothing for exactly as long as she allowed herself, and then turned back. On a Thursday in March, he was in her office going through the revised operations report for the Harwick account. It was 6:15. The floor was mostly empty. "Lily's recital is tomorrow," he said, because there was a pause in the document and because he'd been turning it over for a week and hadn't decided whether to say anything. She looked up. "What does she play?" "Piano. She's been learning for 8 months. The teacher says she has good instincts, but not enough patience for scales." He paused. "That tracks." Something moved in her expression, soft and quick. "My mother made me practice scales for an hour every day," she said. "For 4 years. Did it work?" "I can play scales. I can't play anything else." A beat. "I stopped when I was 12. He thought about that. About a 12-year-old who had decided something. "You should let Lily keep playing the way she plays," Catherine said. She said it like an opinion she'd carried for a long time and hadn't had occasion to offer. "That's the plan," he said. They returned to the document. But the quality of the silence was different after that, less like two professionals occupying a room, and more like two people who had told each other something true. He left at 6:45. At the door, he stopped. "The recital's at 10, he said, not turning around. "If you were, it's open. Parents, guests, anyone." He stopped. "I know it's a Friday morning and you have the Harwick call." "I'll move the call," she said. He nodded, once, and left. She sat in her empty office for a moment after the door closed, looking at the document on her desk, which she was not reading. She picked up her phone and moved the Harwick call to the afternoon. The recital was held in the school gymnasium, which had been arranged with folding chairs and a small upright piano on a low stage, and a banner that said "Spring Concert" in block letters that some of the children had clearly painted themselves. It smelled of floor wax and something that was probably the remnants of lunch. Jack got there early. He got there early to everything involving Lily, because if you were late to the things that mattered to children, they did not tell you it mattered, and they did not have to. He was saving a seat with his coat on the chair beside him when Catherine walked in. She was wearing the gray wool coat. Her hair was down. She spotted him. She walked over with the straightforward manner of someone who had not decided to be self-conscious about this and was simply present. She sat in the seat next to his coat, and he moved the coat, and she said "Good morning" in a normal tone of voice, and the parent on Jack's other side gave them a brief social glance and looked away. It was an ordinary thing. It shouldn't have felt like anything. Lily's group was the second to perform. There were 7 children, ages 6 through 8, arranged in a line that wavered slightly as they settled. Lily was third from the left. She found her father immediately in the audience. Jack watched her eyes sweep the rows and stop on him, and her whole posture changed. The subtle release of a child who has confirmed the important thing. Then Lily's eyes moved one seat over. Her expression went through several things in quick succession, none of which Jack could fully read. They played a simplified version of something that had been arranged for beginners, tentative and brave in the way of small musicians, and Lily played her section with her tongue between her teeth in concentration and got through it without stopping, which was the goal. And when it was over, she looked at Jack and then again at Catherine with an expression that was doing several calculations at once. Afterward, in the gym, with parents collected around plates of cookies and small cups of juice, "You came," Lily said to Catherine. Not accusatory. More like she was confirming a hypothesis. "I did," Catherine said. Lily looked at her with that serious attention she had. "Do you work with my dad?" "Yes." "Is he good at his job?" Catherine didn't look at Jack. She looked at Lily with complete seriousness. "The way you look at someone whose opinion you're taking into account. He's very good at his job," she said. Lily processed this. "He used to be an engineer. He says he's good at figuring out why things break." "That's accurate. I'm going to be a marine biologist," Lily said, with the calm certainty of a 6-year-old who had recently watched a documentary about deep-sea fish. "That's a good field," Catherine said. "I know," Lily said. Jack watched this exchange with something he couldn't quite categorize, which was becoming a theme. It took another 4 months. Not slowly, exactly more like carefully, the way you move through a space you're not sure of, where the floor might be solid or might give way and you have to test it as you go. He asked her to dinner in June. Not in the office, on the street outside the firm, at the end of a day, when they were both standing on the sidewalk with the quality of people who were not quite ready to go separate directions. Dinner, he said. Not a work dinner. She looked at him. The evaluation was fast and, he thought, mostly a formality. Yes, she said. She was not easy, over dinner. She was not easy in any of the senses people mean when they say someone is easy to be with. She was demanding and precise, and she disagreed with him twice in the first hour and was right once, and he was right once, and neither of them conceded the remaining disputed point, which they tabled to a future argument they both knew they were going to have. He had not enjoyed a dinner this much in 4 years. She had not, she realized later, been fully present at a meal in longer than she could accurately recall. The snow started in November. It was not the storm it had been a year ago. Smaller, quieter, the first snow of a new season. It came in the evening, while they were sitting in the kitchen of his apartment, which was on the 3rd floor of a building in Andersonville that was not expensive and had good light. Lily was asleep. Catherine was at his kitchen table with her laptop open and a cup of tea that had gone cold. And Jack was reading something, and this had happened twice before. Both of them working in the same space, which was something she had discovered she was capable of, given the right space. She looked up at the window. "It's snowing," she said. He looked. First snow. "Last year it was a storm," she said. "I know." She was quiet. He put down what he was reading. "I never thanked you," he said, "properly. For what you did that night. You didn't need to." "I know I didn't need to." He looked at her. "I wanted to." She looked back at him with those precise eyes, and the thing she did when she had decided to say something real, the slight stillness before it, the small gathering of herself. "I didn't plan any of it," she said. "I need you to know that. The hospital, I didn't think about it. I just did it. I know. I don't usually," she stopped, started again. "I don't usually do things without thinking about them." "I know," he said again. "That's what I'm thanking you for." The snow came down steadily outside. The kitchen was warm and lit by the overhead light and the laptop screen and one lamp in the corner. From down the hall, faintly, the particular silence of a child who was deeply asleep. She reached across the table. Not reaching for him, exactly laying her hand near enough that it was an offer. He put his hand over hers. They stayed like that for a while, not talking. Just the snow and the warmth and the things they'd both figured out how to mean. It happened in February. He had taken Lily to the lakefront park, the one near Montrose where you could see the city to the south, and it was cold in the clear way of winter afternoons when the sky is a deep, specific blue. She was ahead of him, as she always was, running at the edge where the snow met the concrete path, testing the boundary. He had thought about this for a long time. Not the what he'd known, the what for months, the when, the how. He called her back. "Bug." She came back. She looked up at him. He crouched down so they were at the same level, the way he'd learned to do when he needed her to hear something. "You know how some things change," he said, "and at first it seems like they're just different, and then you realize they're actually better?" She thought about this carefully. "Like when we got the better laundry detergent." He laughed despite himself. "Exactly like that." "Okay," she said. "How would you feel," he said, "if Catherine was around more?" "Like around all the time." Lily looked at him for a long moment with those eyes that were too old for her face and also completely 6 years old. "Does she want to be?" Lily asked. "I'm going to ask her." Another long moment. The wind moved between them. "She came to my recital," Lily said finally. Not a conclusion, exactly. More like evidence she was adding to a calculation. "She did." "Okay," Lily said. She looked back at the lake. "You should ask her." He asked her 3 weeks later, in the kitchen of her apartment, which had more floors and less warmth than his, but which she was learning, slowly, to leave low when people were in it. He did not have a speech. He had a small box that had been his grandmother's and a question he had been working up to for 6 months, and he put the box on the counter and said, "I know this isn't what you planned." She looked at the box. "No," she said. "It's not, and I know your schedule for the next 6 months is already." "Jack, I'm doing the talking too much thing again, aren't I?" "Yes." She picked up the box, opened it, looked at it for a moment with an expression he'd never seen from her before. Not surprise, which she rarely allowed herself, but something that was past surprise. Something that had come through the other side of surprise and arrived somewhere simpler. "Yes," she said again, but differently. He looked at her. "Yes," she said clearly. "I'll marry you." On the day itself, it snowed. Not the way it had snowed the night they met, not aggressive or desperate, but the soft, steady kind of snow that Chicago sometimes produces in late winter, the kind that makes the world quieter and slower and cleaner. They married in the afternoon, small, the kind of ceremony that is for the people in it and not for the idea of a ceremony. Lily stood beside her father in a dress she had chosen herself and shoes she had argued for and won. She held the rings. She took this responsibility with the specific gravity of a 7-year-old who knew what a responsibility was. When it was done, when the words were said and the rings were on, and the small room held the particular warmth of people who were glad to be in it, Lily looked up at Catherine. "Does this mean you're staying?" she asked. Not plaintive, just confirming. Catherine looked at this small, serious person who had inherited her father's patience and was developing her own kind of precision, and felt something open in her chest that she had thought, for a long time, was simply not there. "Yes," she said, "I'm staying." Lily considered this. Then she reached over and took Catherine's hand, with the same directness she brought to everything. Outside, the snow came down. A year ago, a man had gotten into the wrong car in a storm. A woman had let him stay. Neither of them had known what they were beginning. They knew now, and the snow, which had started everything, continued quietly covering the city in white, making the world brief and clean and possible, the way only the first snow of a season can.